Hi, Marc Warnke here, PackGoats.com. I have waited so long to do this video, and we had to make one last piece of equipment to make it possible, but I wanted to do a video on all the things you need to consider as you're choosing the right saddle for you, because there's different needs, and there's different evolution, and there's different costs, and there's different positives and negatives to every design, and how do we fix it, and what are we trying to do to combat it. And all those issues are really relevant as you're choosing this, because we're really talking about a couple of $100 difference in prices between the cheapest and the most expensive. But again, your needs and the goat's needs are really critical. So I really want you to remember this when you're considering this. If I said, hey, let's go hiking, and you go, hell yeah, let's go. And I said, okay, what size shoe do you wear? And you go, 10. And I go, okay, let's put you in 9s and let's go for 10 miles. I will wonder how your feet would feel at the end of that with fit, right? Now, if we were going for a half mile and you put a size 9 on, it might be a little uncomfortable, but it's not going to make that big of a deal. So that's kind of the things you need to think about. If we're going to push our goats hard, they need perfect fit, not kind of fit. And if they aren't going to get pushed super hard, you can sacrifice a little bit of comfort, because you're not going to be asking the things out of your goats that you would maybe in another circumstance. So we're going to kind of talk about that. Now, evolutionary, I started out like a lot of you guys are starting out. And my evolution started at a wood crossbuck. And I found that you'll see right here on Ridge, let me just turn him around, that you're going to see that from back in the day, and Ridge is one of the early goats I got, he's got a big white spot right here. And that white spot is from a saddle rubbing on his shoulder, wearing a bare patch, and then when the hair grows back, it grows back white. So that's how you know when you've had a goat that has had a sore patch. And I have several goats with that got torn up by multiple evolutions of saddles. And that's actually what motivated me to begin to design my own, because I was just sick and tired of sore goats, and I was pushing them hard enough to where we needed perfect fit, and there was nothing that existed in the market today that worked for me. So then therein I started. So let's talk about kind of the evolution of saddles and saddle fit and ruggedness. Now, this is the Kid Pack. The Kid Pack is fun. It gives your kids an example of what it is to carry bulk. You literally carry very little amounts, but it functions very nicely. It's fully soft, so it has lots of flexibility, and will basically fit anybody that you put on it up to about 150 pounds. The other key part is, don't forget this, when you are doing a saddle that has a low amount of weight in it, it's that much more critical that you scale that load. When I'm talking about the difference between 5 pounds a side and 25 pounds a side, 1 pound makes a tremendous difference in variance in a 5-pound load. If I have 6 here and 5 there, that's 20% difference or close. If I have 1 pound difference at 25 and 25, it's profoundly less. So if I'm 1 pound off on this little pack, it's off. So make sure you get one of those scales that we have on the site. They're cheap, they're easy. And the other big thing about this is that you can weigh these panniers individually, which is really important. So this is just fun, it's functional, and it's super affordable. The cost is as cheap as any saddle really and pannier set that's out there for you 4-H'ers. This is the fastest, simplest one to put on. This one will work really well for juveniles. Any goat really less than 150 pounds, this fits well on. Much bigger than that starts looking like a big goat in a little coat, if you remember that saying from back in the day. But anyway, that's the Kid Pack. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on that. What I'm super excited to introduce to you on this video is now we made an adult soft pack. Now we're talking about saddles today, so I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on the pannier, so I'm just going to go ahead and pull these panniers off. But they are independent. It's very much like the Kid Pack, but the saddle itself is where it's really important. So let's talk about soft packs. Soft packs are great for one distinct thing. They will literally fit any goat. Now what's the negative? The negative is, because you have a non-rigid surface touching the goat, being soft, you now have, and there's only one other soft pack on the market, and I love it. It's super high quality, but it has this inherent problem, same as ours, is that when you have a soft pack, you are reliant on the cinch creating a tremendous amount of pressure to hold that saddle onto the goat's back and to not spin. when you have a rigid pack frame, hold up, Rich. When you have rigid sides on here, then that pressure is what holds it in place from spinning because of the weight down and because of the rigidity of the sideboards. When you make that soft, this saddle is going to want to spin on you. So soft saddles spin. The other soft saddle on the market, again, super well constructed, great design, little issues with the pannier, kind of complicated, but really well thought out. The only problem is you have to put this cinch so tight to have a heavy load that it's like you or I trying to put a backpack on, cinching it down so tight that our chest is being compressed in, and then trying to be out of breath at 9,000 feet. It's just uncomfortable. And again, we're going to go right back to that example I gave you. If I'm going to require 10 miles out of you and I'm going to put you in a pair of shoes that's one size too small, there's no way you're going to be comfortable at the end of that, and you're not going to want to keep going, and they are the same way, right? So it's really important that you remember that. So if you have a soft saddle design, I suggest, and this is what you want, it's great, just don't load it heavy. You can't do big loads and still have your goat be comfortable in a soft saddle design. So our soft saddle design is made for about 15 pounds a side, 30 pounds, and it works super well. And the other thing this becomes is now one of the most affordable combination saddle and pannier set on the market. So if you're that person that's looking for that, hey, I want to be a goat packer, but I'm not a hardcore, I don't want to go all crazy, I just want to pack a lunch in and I want a saddle to throw on my big adult goat, here you go. One of the easiest, most simplest, most comfortable, well thought out designs that there is. There's several innovations that you'll be able to find out specifically on this, but as far as soft saddles go, this answers a lot of the problems, which is primarily cinch pressure, by acknowledging the fact that a soft saddle design is not intentionally, or shouldn't be, to carry big heavy loads. And so we made one that was smaller, more compact, more simply made to carry 35-pound loads, not only cost effectively, but as well as effectively on the goat itself. You'll notice that there's rigidity on the top of ours, so we do actually have a rigid board in this structure, and then the padding on the underside to allow for that rigidity. And again, you can take the panniers off to weigh them individually. So I really like it. A good chest collar or breast collar and a decent breechin. These will work functionally very well for a lighter use person and a lighter goat. Now, on to the next one. Now, I want to acknowledge when I step up to this, that the majority of time that I see people make the decision about buying this saddle, and they are hardcores that want to get after it, that want to go, they decide on this saddle out of cost. And I understand, money does not grow on trees. You work hard to earn it. You only have so much budget for fun, and this is fun, this is a passion. But there are problems with a wooden crossbuck that you have to overcome with designs to make it function well. And so it's very important you understand when you're choosing to save the money, what you're choosing for, and what has to be there to overcome that. So let's talk about the wooden crossbuck. The wooden crossbuck, number one, let's see if Ridge will hold still for me, and it's okay, buddy. All right, good boy. So the wooden crossbuck, number one, you have to remember, is difficult to keep in place, and it has to have a pad. Now, even on ours, you buy the crossbuck and then you buy the pad. No question, this is the best pad out there for breathability, for lower amount of surface area that holds in heat, and for function to attach to any crossbuck. These you can get on the site independently, and you can get them with the crossbuck. But when you get a wooden crossbuck, you also got to get a pad, okay? This is the best one out there that functions well with it. The other thing that you got to remember about a crossbuck is that there is only the goats in the middle that are in that fit, both this way and this way, that it fits. It fits about 20 to 30% of goats pretty well. And that's why you want a big, thick pad to overcome its lack of fit, because it doesn't fit very well. The other thing is, because of its lack of fit, you have a difficult time keeping a saddle like that in place. It's hard to hold it down. So again, you're going to be required to exert more cinch pressure, which is less comfortable on the goat. So with the wooden crossbuck, you want to make sure that you have a good heavy duty cinch. And the cinch is really important to be holding the saddle down as its foundational piece. But because the cinch pressure and because the lack of fit make this saddle difficult to fit all goats. And again, we're going to overcome that with the pad. We're going to overcome that with the cinch, creating cinch pressure to hold that down. But the biggest, most important thing that you got to remember is that a saddle wants to slide up, just like it is with mules. If you have any experience with horses and mules, it always wants to slide forward up on the withers. So you always have a saddle that wants to slide forward, and the most important place to hold this saddle rigidly is the back. So in making our wooden crossbuck, we put on a super high level advanced britchin to keep that in place. And the britchin is custom fit and adjustable in all its different areas to fit very well. The other thing, because you're going to need decent britchin pressure, you are also going to have this riding against the goat's hocks. And because it's going to be riding against the hocks on the back side of the goat, hey Rich, thank you, right back here, if you don't have a slick design in your britchin, you are going to wear that backside of his hair off every season. It's just going to be gone. It's going to be bald. But because of the slickness of this britchin design, we now have a britchin that you can hold steady, because again, the lack of fit, and you can hold it steady very well because of the britchin design, and it can be nice and tight without chafing. So that's an important thing to overcome. If we're trying to save costs, which we did on the wooden crossbuck, the breast collar works pretty darn well to have this design, as long as its insertion point is proper and high enough to keep that above that constant droop down that you'll get with breast collars. So overall, I believe that a wooden crossbuck, again, has inherent flaws, but we've built into it the solution. So when you do a cost comparison and you're trying to save yourself money, and again, I get it, when you start comparing that you have to get a pad, that you have to get multiple other components, including the panniers and how you combine it all, you will only save yourself a little bit of money with any other crossbuck on the market, and you will be getting, in my opinion, a non-solution to some of the problems that come along with this design. So that's the wooden crossbuck. That's what I wanted to share with you there. Now, if you are trying to go hard and you're trying to get it done and you're trying to go in deep, the only way to truly do that and to get proper fit is with an adjustable saddle. Because the reality is, Noah back here, who is a Boer cross, and you guys are familiar with Noah, he's like trying to fit a 55-gallon drum in a saddle, and that wooden crossbuck certainly won't sit on him right. Then you got Merciless or Ridge here that are those A-framey alpine goats. They're shaped like this. Noah's shaped like this. How do you fit them? The other thing that people don't consider is that a goat very often, especially like Chester, my lead goat, he has a big rumen. So he's not only narrow, but he's actually wider in the back than he is in the front. So if you look at Chester's saddle, when I custom fit it to him, it fits like this. So it's different here and it's different here. And this is the only saddle that does that functionably. Now there is one other aluminum adjustable saddle on the market, and I've owned it. In fact, if you look at all my early videos, it's what I put on there. It was my last, man, there's got to be a saddle out there that won't chew up my goats. And it did. It still chewed up my goats. In fact, if you look at several of my goats, you'll see the rubs up front. And the suggestion I got from that manufacturer was to put a pony saddle or a pony blanket underneath the already established pad on that system to offer double layers of padding so it didn't chew holes in the shoulders of my goats. I didn't want to do that. That's a ton of material, it's heat dispersal, it was extra cost, it was all those different things, and then that's what led us down this road. This is the fully adjustable saddle. It has bolts on all four, and this thing is super heavy duty. You can loosen all four of these or all six of these bolts, and not only does this saddle then flex this way, it flexes this way. And because of that, you can custom fit any goat. And then once you settle it into its position, and I have a video that shows you how to fit this, it's not hard. Once you settle it into position, then you have the capability to set that on that goat, and it is custom fit every time. But here's the key, it's rigid. And because it's rigid now, and it's custom fit, the double cinch is super nice, but you don't have to have heavy cinch pressure. In fact, you'll be amazed at how light the cinch pressure you need to keep this both in position and from spinning. The other thing that you'll notice is that we have the furthest forward insertion point on the cinch of any saddle that's ever been built. And the reason is, when you put this in here, it ends up catching them too far behind the shoulder, and you end up, instead of being up here on their chest where they have musculature and they have a sternum and they have everything to load that cinch with that pressure and be that stable place to hold that cinch in place, you now have to drop it down here. And if you want to give yourself an example of that, is literally just press hard here and press hard here. Which one are you more vulnerable at? Well, they're the same. So they can take a strap here really nicely, but because the way this cinch is, you have to bounce it back here on all the other saddle designs, even including ours, because there's no room. So when we were able to put it up here, we brought that cinch back, and it fits now perfectly right behind the shoulder where you want it. So traditionally on these saddles, come on Richie. So traditionally on these saddles, you end up with a cinch that when it drops straight down, it actually is clear back here. Because remember, when you're putting that cinch here, you can see even when the saddle sits perfect, as it is, this is Ridge's saddle, it fits him. If I drop down that cinch right here, it would be too far back. You know, I'm clear back off the shoulder. But because it drops down here, I'm that perfect hands width right behind the shoulder where I want to be, and it sits naturally. Now the problem is, and you'll see this in single cinch designs, when you have a single cinch design, especially with it positioned forward like ours, once you cinch that front cinch down, this saddle wants to ride a wheelie. And that adjustable aluminum saddle I talked about before, it is a wheelie master. It just stands up like this until you put weight on, and then the pannier holds it down, and it's just not a good design. So anyway, the cinch comes down in here, but we have taken the back cinch and brought it clear back far and at an angle so that we can put that rear cinch and create pressure to have that saddle sit perfectly. So now we have fit. Now what about the other two options? The other two options that are really, really neat on this saddle is that we've gone to the yoke. Now the yoke was something that I was a bit skeptical about. I didn't know how it would work, and it works so good, it's ridiculous. Its inherent flaw is that it gives a little bit more to hook up on going through the brush. It's not a big deal. It's not like I have it happen often, but it is a deal. The other thing is this yoke design and how it fits allows for pressure, and where it ends up exerting pressure because of how it fits. Sorry, Ridge, you're just sick and tired of this, aren't you? So, how this fits is it clicks in, and then we put it in here. So now when the pressure is exerted, you can see that that pressure is exerted equally over this shoulder space. And number one, you're not going to get chafing, which all the other breast collars do. They chafe because they slide back and forth as the goat walks. But also you'll notice it's a cough fest. All your goats are coughing. Why? Because that breast collar is pushing against the esophagus right here. They're trying to breathe hard, and its major pressure point is right here, versus the yoke design, which its pressure point is equally distributed across this whole surface. Because remember, that's what this is all about too, is surface area. We want the most amount of saddle touching the goat as possible to disperse that weight across where he can carry that. So the better we can fit, and the more perfectly we can fit in a larger area, keeping contact, the better. The problem with that wooden crossbuck that's set, for those goats that it doesn't fit, you end up sometimes with as little as 10% of that actual crossbuck touching the goat. And any good horseman will tell you that it does not matter how good the pad fits. It's all about the under portion of it. It's called the tree, and the tree is what's important. So if you want to see if yours fits your goat, you put the tree on with no padding, and then you see how well it fits. That's where this one comes in. And the other component is you save the money of needing a whole nother pad and dealing with that extra piece of equipment by the fact that the pad comes with this design. The last thing is we do have our adjustable and fit britchin, and you'll notice again it's the same as I explained to you before. So that is kind of how all the saddles break down, and there are positives and there are negatives. There's positive and negatives to our saddle. There's positive and negatives to every saddle that's out there, and money doesn't grow on trees. So I thought it was really important to kind of break down the whole portion of the saddle, how to think about it, what works, what doesn't. One last thing I wanted to show you visually before we finish is this is the difference between Noah's saddle and Ridge's saddle. Now if you actually, and the easiest way to tell this is to flop it over. So if you actually look at this angle of that saddle, this is Ridge's. Now Ridge's is more of a narrow goat. You'll actually notice that on this saddle that it's actually tipped in, okay, when I hold it there. Now, the other thing, when you look at Noah's, in that same way, his is actually tipped out. So now you have at least this much of a degree difference in the fit between Noah and Ridge. So you can see that those two, side by side, and it's so hard to do it, you can see how much wider this one is than this one. The other thing that I want to quickly show you with Ridge is a goat that if I asked you, hey, Mark, is Ridge an example of a goat that's wide in the back and narrow in the front? I would have looked at him and said, not really. But when you look at his saddle fit, it definitely is. So you can see the gap here versus the gap here. So he is a goat that is narrower on his front and wider in his back. So he is an example of a goat that is adjustable in two different ways. So again, I would ask you just to remember that I acknowledge that money doesn't grow on trees, that all of us are going to use these goats for different reasons, and at the same time, if you are going to require a lot of work out of your goat and you want them to perform for you, get them a pair of shoes that'll fit them. And if you can't afford a pair of shoes that are going to fit them, get them a compensating mechanism through additional gear that will help to offset the lack of fit and help to perform your goats well. And if you're just looking to save money and you're not looking to use your goat super hard or load a lot of weight, the new soft saddle is definitely the way to go. So I hope that's helpful for you. And this is Marc Warnke at PackGoats.com.